So Donald Trump has never been a popular president. At no point in his first term or his second term has his favorability or approval ratings been positive. He's never had more people who like him than dislike him. So like looking at that, you would say to yourself, and it'd be reasonable to say it, like it should be easy to beat Donald Trump. And it should be easy to beat Donald Trump. And it should have been easy to beat Donald Trump in 2024. It should be easy to beat Donald Trump in 2016, right? And at least in 2016, the popular vote, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and it was the electoral college that led to disenfranchising those voters and to the voters' preferences not being carried out. But in 2024, we don't have that problem. Donald Trump won the popular vote. And the problem, very clearly, is the Democrats. If you have a president and a candidate like Donald Trump who is widely unpopular, right, and has never been popular, then you would expect the opposition to that candidate to be, at the very least, popular or more popular than Donald Trump, right? But no. Donald Trump currently sits at like favorability ratings, depending on which polls you look at, have him in the mid 40s, lower 40s, some in the upper 30s in terms of his approval ratings. That's fucking garbage. That's bad. But not as bad as the Democrats. The Democrats are generally in the mid 30s to upper 20s, depending on if you're looking at like congressional Democrats versus like the Democratic Party writ large, for, you know, different ways of asking these questions, different types of polling, etc. But in no like set of data are the Democrats viewed more favorably or have a higher approval rating than Donald Trump. So in a world where you have a president, one of the least popular presidents in our history, the Democratic Party is less popular than it has also ever been in our history. And this is, you know, a lot of these polling firms have been doing this polling for 30, 40 years. And across the board, the Democrats are the least popular that they have ever been. So when I make these videos talking about the Democratic Party, I get these comments and I get these, you know, honestly hysterical liberal voters in my comment section, like, that my videos are the reason why Donald Trump is the president. And it's like, first of all, I voted for Kamala Harris. But second of all, that's not it. The reason why Donald Trump is president is comments like that. It's this failure to look at the Democratic Party for what it is and realize that the American people don't like the Democrats. And you don't have to agree with them on that. You don't have to like that. But this putting your head in the sand and blaming everyone else but the Democrats, it's insane to me. I don't get going to bat for a party like that. Yes, the Republicans are awful. There's no question of that. But that doesn't excuse the Democrats for being awful. And regardless of whether you agree that the Democrats are awful, politics is about convincing people of things, right? And you cannot go into these political discussions where you know that a majority of Americans do not like the Democratic Party and get angry at people who are pointing that out. What you need to do is convince the Democrats to get people to like them. If you want if you're so tied to the Democratic Party, I don't think you should be. But if all that you care about is getting Democrats elected at all costs, the first place you should go is to the Democrats and convince them to adopt policies and messaging that appeals to the wide swath of voters and non-voters, people who are eligible to vote but who don't vote, which is a big chunk of people. There's a lot of these myths that we have in politics that have lasted past the point of when they were true, or maybe never were true, but were part of the mainstream. These ideas that like demographically the United States is moving in the direction of the Republicans, like the more people that you get to vote, of moving in the direction of the Democrats, you know, as the nation is like young and brown and more, you know, more people from Latin America and Asia, etc., are moving to the United States. And as it gets more demographically diverse, the Democratic Party will naturally do better. That has proven wrong. The idea that the more people you get to vote, just by virtue of numbers, will benefit the Democratic Party. If we just get everyone out to vote, Democrats win. Wrong. Also been proven wrong. And then the idea that like it's a systematic thing and a systemic thing, like, you know, that gerrymandering or the electoral college are responsible for why Democrats don't have power. Wrong. Republicans won the popular vote in the presidency. We all know that. But I think a lot of people miss the fact that when you add up all the votes for Republicans for the House of Representatives, they won about 4.5 million more votes for the House of Representatives than Democrats did. And that about pans out for how many more seats in Congress they have. Gerrymandering is a problem, don't get me wrong. But the reality is that it's kind of a wash between the two parties. If all you care about is the two parties, the gerrymandering is largely canceled itself out across the country. 4.5 million votes, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the numbers were because they've changed since the election, but like 5 or 6 representatives in Congress. And, you know, I think each congressional representative is supposed to be representing somewhere around 750,000 people. Nonetheless, having about 4.5 million more votes and having about 5 or 6, you know, a seat majority in Congress, that about pans out correctly. So this idea that like it's a systemic thing that's against Democrats, also wrong. The main systemic force that disempowers Democrats and left-wing voters and liberal voters is the Senate. That's the main anti-democratic body that exists. There's no reason why a state like Wyoming should have the same level of representation in the Senate as a state like California. 1 out of every 8 Americans lives in California. 1 out of every 67 Americans lives in Wyoming. And they have the same representation. You understand? So that's a completely undemocratic body, and it should be completely abolished. But nonetheless, that's the main structural force. Beyond that, all those things that I just mentioned, none of those are the reason why Democrats aren't doing well. The reason why Democrats aren't doing well is because Democrats suck and Americans don't like the Democrats. And the reason why is because the Democrats are viewed as elitist, they're viewed as corporatist, they're viewed as out of touch, and you have to solve that within the Democratic Party. You have to get the Democratic Party to be advocating for policies that benefit more people. And they have to be good at messaging that. And they haven't been doing either of those things. If you want to beat Donald Trump, which I think many of us do, it's not about focusing on Donald Trump. It's about focusing on the voter. And so I'll tie this all up at the end here by saying, you know, that many Democratic voters are excited at the prospect of this gerrymandering thing, right? Not excited at it like in general, but very much like ready for California and these blue states to stick it to Republicans by giving them a taste of their own medicine, right? Like that's the comments that I get a lot of. Like we have to fight fire with fire. You know, we can't just sit by and be the good guys and not, face this cheating head on, et cetera, et cetera. So I've talked about a lot of that in other videos. I won't get too into that, but like, it's only fair if you consider the Republicans and the Democrats to be the only games in town. But most a plurality of Americans are neither Republican or Democrat. And so to rig the system in favor either the Republicans or the Democrats is bullshit. Not to mention that there are negative impacts from gerrymandering regardless of party. Counties and school districts and police districts and all these kind of levels of government being split into multiple congressional districts in order to entrench the power of either political party will have negative impacts on you. If you're a neighbor and you have children going to the same school and have the same school district, and your congressional districts are bisected, and so he's in a different congressional district than you are, there's reason, and not to mention your county, right? There's reason to be that leads to an inefficiency and leads to bad representation in Congress. Like I'm here in Sonoma County, and I think between the way that the districts are broken up, I think there are 3 congressional representatives from my county, just the way that the county is split. Now, obviously, you can't like avoid all of that, but you could do work to make sure that people are able to be represented as a community, right? Like we should all roughly have, like everyone around here, we should have largely the same, maybe 1 or 2 congressional districts. I mean, I could see maybe like the rural area versus the urban area having similar needs and looking for similar representation in Congress. There's just different ways of doing this. If you think about it outside of just partisan politics, think about the interests of the people and the demographics of the people that are in your districts, and focus again, like I was just saying, and my last point, on the voter. The voter is who matters here, and it's not about these political parties. Their interests and their needs and their wants are not the same as our interests and our needs and our wants. But the final thing I was saying here, sorry, I went a little tangent there, but many Democratic voters across the country are excited at this opportunity to stick it to the Republicans, right? Through gerrymandering California at the expense of the California voter. But the California voter has to allow that to happen. And as I've mentioned, this idea that you're going to, that what Gavin Newsom and California Democrats are proposing is going to be the last word, and Republicans aren't going to do anything after that. They're not going to escalate from there. They're not going to use this as an excuse to delegitimize the election in 2026. Not that they need one. I'm just saying that one of the many reasons to not like this is that it's just going to lead to more delegitimization. And they hold the Congress, they hold the White House, and they hold the Supreme Court. So the buck kind of stops with Republicans anyway. And any escalation you do, I tend to think is going to end when the Republicans say it's going to end. And so, nonetheless, California voters have to approve this gerrymandering of districts. And they're looking at having to call a special election here in California in November of this year. Recent reporting today, which I'll throw up on the screen, Californians are not down. And there's a lot of reasons Californians are not down. I'll tell you, the Democrats run California as a one-party state, and we have the highest cost of living. We have just insane rents. I think the average home cost is almost $800,000. Average rents, depending on what city you're in, but average rents are almost at $3,000. I went to the grocery store the other day to get some cereal, some Cinnamon Toast Crunch, $8.50. Butter costs almost $6 where I live. Okay. Californians, while we continue to elect Democrats because Republicans are so fucking repellent, are not interested by and large in entrenching the power of the Democratic Party even further. The Democratic Party is bloated, especially here in California. It's anemic. It doesn't address the needs of the voters. And it's a perfect example of how the Democrats have failed the country at the national level. They've continued to focus on everything but meaningful policy that will help their constituents. They've focused on Donald Trump. They've focused on all these different institutions. They've focused on trying to win using every possible method that isn't good policy. So you want us to go and entrench them further and give them more power? So I really feel like this is going to backfire, and it's going to make Gavin Newsom and California Democrats and national Democrats look like fucking idiots. When they go through all this work, they call a special election. It's going to cost millions of dollars to call a special election, and they lose.